Why, hello there. How's every little thing? So, in case you haven't noticed, we went through a kind of sort of uh, plague is the right word or the wrong word. It's really hard to tell. Pandemic, I guess, is what everyone's calling it. And at least in my country, it's been rolling down a little bit. Apparently, cinemas are opening pretty soon. A lot of people are probably not as eager for things to go back to complete normal or to interact or to go outside or to do anything ever again, ever. And my idea was to recommend some films because why not? I think there's a lot of anxiety about going back to normal and to try to stay in as much as possible, which is really reasonable. So I have compiled a list. Now, I actually compiled this back in December. It was a list I put up on my blog and my blog's Facebook page. It's just a list of the underrated films I really enjoyed in 2000 in the 2010s. This is an idea I basically just stole from Nyx Fears. If you're not watching her, why are you watching me, you weirdo? I'll put a link to her videos. She's done a couple of them going over weird, messed up films, and I highly recommend every one of them. I, of course, watched all of them. I just fixed my hair so it'll look different in the shot. So, hair fix, that's important. So, yeah. So I feel like I'm kind of cheating with the first one. Denis Villeneuve is obviously a very well known, prolific enough director. He's doing Dune soon. He did Sicario, Arrival, Blade Runner sequel. I enjoy him. He's pretty good. But this one is not really one that's as sung as his other films. I think it's because of its rather surrealist, out there nature, and it's way more nightmarish. But that's what I really enjoy about it, because of course I did. Probably one of Jake Gyllenhaal's best performances. I love the way he gets these two characters, and they feel so distinctive within the shot. This movie is unsettling. It's so gets under your skin. I love just thinking about it, contemplating what the meaning is and what exactly it's trying to get across. And every great film should do that. This is the only Andrea Arnold film I've seen, and it's kind of failing on my own part. It's wonderfully atmospheric, and she actually spent a lot of time with people who sell magazine subscriptions, teenagers who do the jobs done in this film. So it really gets into the mindset of those being left behind in this post-capitalist dystopic nightmare. Sacha Lane is just such a great, youthful, exuberant energy, and there's an almost like predatory way that actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf really kind of hones in on her. That's just this balance between the rather horrific, terrible things you've gone through her life, but also her own naivete, and how this kind of culminates in a rather wonderful, exuberant, beautifully shot roller coaster. If you're really into more plotty kind of films, I can't imagine this is the one you would really go for. But I really dug it, and it's certainly something that kept me thinking, and its images just kind of pop into my head every now and again. Great work. This one people probably know a little more because of the film that was made about it, the more fictional film, Welcome to Morrowind by Zemeckis. And I have my own opinions of that film, but the documentary is better. If you don't know, he was a man who was severely brutally beaten to the point where he suffered pretty intense brain damage. How he deals with it is by creating a series of action figures and adventures, and it's a strange coping mechanism. I think one thing that really makes this is that Hogan Camp himself is such a character. He's got a lot of personality that is trying to escape his unfortunate tragedy that happened towards him. I like the fact that this movie doesn't really try to romanticize him too difficultly, which is something that the Zemeckis film does. The difference between him admitting something to a girl he knows compared to how they dramatize that, it shows the difference in quality and presentation of both versions. I like that there's an unspectacular feel towards how some of these ideas are going across to you, and it's certainly one I keep on wanting to go back to. It's really good.
I'm afraid that they won't be able to remember Dad like I do.
So yeah, might as well talk about one that was made right here in my home county. It's about three brothers and their father is dying, and they have a watch that they need to go to a seaside town in West Cork to try to get, so they jump into thing as a road trip. It's a rather typical kind of road trip adventure film for kids. It has the trappings and the styles and the settings and stuff like that, but I think what really makes this is the chemistry between the three leads, and you really buy their bond. And despite the fact that this is set in the late 80s, especially for people who lived in Ireland around that time and around my age growing up, there's certain universality about watching their childhood and relating to it on that level. I really feel like we have very similar childhoods to the kids being depicted here. It really gets across how beautiful Cork can be and the great use of our landscape and our luscious greenery when we get to weather. That I think it's something that I really would highly recommend if you've never been here. It really shows how beautiful this county is. More films to take advantage of that. And I know personally I have friends who are in the Cork movie scene and they've made some pretty great films, but I don't know if I've seen one yet that really captures the rather beautiful adventure that you can have just going out your backyard. I mean, technically speaking, Cork is actually rather large comparatively to the rest of the country, but let's move on. I've made this awkward. This is another cheating one, I guess, because this movie actually got a lot of press when it first came out. Especially because it's because Daniel Radcliffe is playing a flatulent corpse, and that's mostly what people talked about was the farting corpse angle of it. But this film is fantastic. Really shows the level of commitment that Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe have to the absolute madness of this. It's really not a lot of films like this. I love that the soundtrack is interspliced with effects and sounds you hear throughout the film. It's really clever. It's one of those things that starts off as this weird absurdist comedy but turns into this rather dense melodrama about this man trying to find his place and discover his identity through this flatulent corpse and how much of it was in his mind. I don't think the movie excuses how uncomfortable and off kilter his personality is, but he's incredibly sympathetic. And again, that goes on to just Paul Dano's a great actor. So is Radcliffe. I've always admired that even though he was in one of the biggest franchises of all time, he managed to make a career doing these really weird, distinctive films, and this is another great one. I think the best thing to recommend it is how Paul Dano was sold to it by the Daniels, who are the directors. They told him the first fart will make you laugh, the last fart will make you cry. And without saying too much, they were right on the money.
An egomaniac.
Director Kate Shenton put a lot of her own familiarity with the movie scene into this film, and it really gets across about the COVID. It really gets across how difficult it was for her to be taken seriously, both as a independent director who nobody really knew and as a woman. There's some great comedy here, and I love the escalation it takes, where it's not that you excuse what happens by the end, but you understand it. You understand that particular frustration. It's really good. I really like it.
Wajda.
So this one did get a bit of press when it first came out. It's the first one I think that was shot entirely in Saudi Arabia. First time a female director worked within it, and I think apparently I heard stories about like how she had to direct her actors in the back of a car, truck. It deals with that particular issue. I think at the time it was just made legal that women could ride bikes. Again, don't quote me on this, you can look it up yourself. But it really argues about women's place within this society, and it's informative in a way that's not the most comfortable of watches, but I think that's offset by the fact that the lead character is so charming and rambunctious. You really follow her plight, and it's a lot of fun watching her just do whatever she can to get that shagging by. If you're looking for something more in depth and more compelling than just a child's perspective of these issues of women's place in Saudi Arabian culture, I can't imagine it's something that would enthrall you or inspire you or anything, but it's an important film, and I think it really does know how to get across these problems in a really entertaining way, while also not deflating the seriousness of the issues being tackled. So this film seems like a bet. Like, how can you make an effective horror film? One of the dumbest ideas you could possibly think of. It's a dress that's haunted, and it's great. It's so fucking good. I love the stylization of it. I love how strange and off kilter it is. It really makes the characters seem human, while the situation around them is anything but. It's one of those things that really gets the idea across of how unsettling and disturbing this all is, because it really does get across how much it'll mess up your head. Something so innocuous can be so terrifying, and it really commits to it. It takes it really seriously. I love the stylization of it. I love how everything looks. I love how the film moves. I love the mode of it. I love the tone of it. I love the soundtrack. Just everything about it just works so well as a movie. Yeah, really good. Highly recommended.
And then just turned around and just went bang bang.
There's a lot of films that look into the Northern Ireland crisis, and a lot of them actually came out more recently. Like, there was like a slew of them within the space of like a year and a half maybe. This one was probably the most pertinent and effective to me. It's a woman who follows this family because her son was sent to the Real IRA to be shot in the leg by the mother, hence the title. It's one that gets across the unmitigated tension that's within these families, within these communities in the north. There's a really great scene where one of the younger men talks about the boredom and the restlessness of their situation, and it really shows how they're kind of trapped, both by the drug culture that surrounds them, but also by how they felt abandoned and completely underserved by their country. It's unsettling and it's a difficult watch, but certainly one that gets across the apprehension and the taking time bomb, which is these communities that are left in the dirt. So this is a movie, it's basically just 90 minutes of Tom Hardy in a car, and all you see is his face, and it's one of the most cinematic things you could possibly see. The editing of this film is crazy. I'm messing with my hair. The editing in this film is crazy. It's one that really gets you within the tension of what this man is going through, and his mistakes coming to bite him really hard on the ass. I think if anyone besides Hardy tried to pull this off, I don't think it would have been as effective. Got such a great intensity, and he really knows how to get across the emotion and the hyper drama of it through his facial expression and through the way the lighting hits him and the music keeps going. It's a really great showcase of a locked room concept where we're stuck in this one place for so long, and it's the most effective way of how to bring out the best drama possible in such a limited setting.
Dumbledore, he said to Dumbledore, only the energy of our mutual orgasm combined with unbroken eye contact can close the door.
So this is a cute, really endearing and insatiably lovable film about slash fiction, which, if you don't know, is a fan fiction term for gay and lesbian romances. It's such a great coming of age movie, and it's about finding your identity, but also it clearly has a love and appreciation and an affection for this kind of community, and making the weird jokes that it makes, and pointing out the relationships that occur, the bonds that are made through these communities and how they help people come out of their shells. It's sweet and lovable, and I really love a good coming of age story that has a kind of unconventional narrative to it. It just makes me smile and it makes me really happy, and I really, really like films that, you know, make me happy. I need to watch more films that make me smile during this time period. It's definitely one I should give a rewatch as I fix my hair for the billionth time in this video. I am so sorry. I'm looking at myself directly at the camera and I keep on messing with my fucking head. It's so, must be so distracting. There's a certain ethical dilemma about how this film was made. It's not really something I want to get into, but it is about like the power of cinema and how it can make somebody in a dark place really come out and embrace a certain delight that this art form can bring you. These kids were confined to a New York apartment by their father, and they found an escape through recreating movie scenes in their apartment, and it's elaborate. It's just crazy, the resourcefulness of these kids finding a way to do this, but it doesn't shy away from the rather serious tone of it. I don't think it really can, and you sort of see the effects of that because the movie takes place over the course of a few years, and eventually the father just stopped interacting with them and talking to them and allowing them to film him. He's quite a character. Let's put it that way. I'm glad this was such a great escape for them. I'm glad they were able to find a way to break out of this rather difficult and unusual situation through the power of film. And it's one of those things where it stops being about watching these kids making cool film stuff and starting to connect to them as people and really hoping that their situation works out for the better. Yeah, highly recommend it. Hey. As I said, this list was made during December, so this was my Christmas episode, and so it's a Christmas movie. You can watch Christmas movies whenever. It's one of those things where it takes the idea of the final part of Home Alone and kind of puts a rather twisted turn on it, and that's all I want to really say, because it will either give, I don't want to give away too much of the story. The acting is so good in this, especially when the kids who are like, they're if they didn't get that right because they are the predominant focus, they would have been without any, they really wouldn't have had an effective film. But man, they knock it out of the park, and it's intense, and it's got great twists and turns. It has one of the best final images I've ever seen. I fucking love how this movie ends. I honestly thought watching this movie get a lot more love than it does, but it's just kind of fallen into the wayside, which is a shame because it's really entertaining. It's a really good example of a fun, twisted horror film when you get your mates together and just have a fun, rip-roaring time. The Safdie brothers, who kind of made a name for themselves with Uncut Gems and Good Times. This one was was before that, and it's about a heroin addict, and it's dramatizing her memoirs. She's in the film herself. It's one that has a kind of rough edge to it. It's definitely not the most well produced cinematically on this list, but I think it gets across the messiness and the ugliness of her life as an addict and to her codependent relationship with her boyfriend at the time. And they're both so great in this part, and I really get into their heads and how they connect together. It's one of the best films visually and narratively about an addict I've seen in quite some time. It's one that gets that experience across in a way I've rarely ever seen in a film before and since. Yeah, it's great. It's rather uncomfortably made, but it's one that gets you. This movie is a great showcase of modernity, framing it through China in the past, the present, and the future. It's a really compelling emotional story. The places it takes its characters and the situation really kept me guessing about where exactly this is all going to go, and I like the way the characters dip in and out of the story and the focus. That's how you experience life, really, that people come and go and people gain more importance and lose importance as time goes on. And it's one that's framed around how culture changes and how the world changes around you. This is based on China, but it goes into Australia for a bit as well and stuff like that. And honestly, it's one of the better depictions of a not too distant future. Might not come true. These movies rarely do, but I appreciate the effort they went into to try to make it way more emotionally real than, Back to the Future 2, I guess. But that's no disrespect to Back to the Future Part 2, but it's not the most. It was never the most realistic of futures. If you've noticed a slight frame change, that's because I had to remove the video and upload it onto my computer, and now this is part 2. So, part 2. Yay! This movie has probably one of the most beautifully uplifting endings of any film I've seen, and it's totally ruined for me because of a rice pudding ad. Not going to go into more detail. Watch the film and find out.
Are we going to crash into the sun? Probably. What?
The Doctor herself, Jodie Whittaker, is in a film that's basically a treatise on Arrested Development. Probably one of the best ones I've seen in quite a while. She gets this kind of rambunctious youthfulness of somebody who has been stuck in a rut all their 20s and never had a chance to grow up, but also the humanity and pathos surrounding that, and the difficulty with a loss in her family and her inability to cope with that. There's some great physical comedy here, and it really shows what exuberant leading presence she is before she became one of the most popular science fiction characters of all time. I really like this one. It's charming and witty. There's a lot of films about this topic in particular, people who can't grow up well into their 20s and 30s. This is definitely one of the better ones, and I really like the fact that it's a woman. It just brings a different energy to it, and I don't think she's treated any differently than if it was played by a man, but I definitely like what Whittaker brings to this role, and really what she gets out of this material. It's a lot of fun.
I can't believe this is happening to me.
Another Irish film, this one made by one Lenny Abrahamson, who's probably best known for doing Room and several other things. He's great. He's one of my favourite Irish directors. This is one of his lesser sung ones, which is a shame because it's definitely up there one of my favourite of his. It's a really surprisingly threadbare look at privilege and the way that our social stature defines who we are in very specific ways. This is the breakout role of Jack Rayner. He was watched in this movie when he was chosen to be in the Transformers 4, which isn't a great blotch on his record, but hey, I got his name out there. He really captures the quiet, not so much arrogance. He's extremely confident sports. Yeah, I think he's a Gaelic player. He's not presented in a way that makes him unlikable. He's actually really charming and really affable till the hook kicks in and the plot really gets going, and it really shows his lingering guilt over what he does in a very powerful, self-destructive way. It's one of those things where it's a slow burn to nothing, but it keeps you on edge the entire time. I really like this. So this is from a South African director. He had a more recent film come out, which I'll probably put the name up here somewhere because I haven't looked this up, but I actually saw it recently, and it's really good. I prefer Crumbs personally because it's such a good kind of showcase of world building without it being the huge focus. The focus is on this kind of madcap adventure with this character who's really fascinating, and he's very likable. It kind of molds how culture shapes us and the ways that it gets remembered as throughout time goes on. Like, I love the fact that it's kind of bartering comes back, but it's pop culture ephemera. It's really clever commentary without it being kind of the main focus of the film, and his other films like that as well. He's really good at that kind of that satire, while also making a really compelling sci-fi story about a man who's trying to hunt after Santa Claus. Really like the actor as well. He's in the other film too, and I look forward to whenever these guys make another film. They're people who clearly don't have a lot of revenue, but they put out so much passion and effort, and they have that kind of absurdist edge where they don't take themselves so seriously, that makes their work so compelling and so entertaining. And I can't wait to see them once again. This is a more recent release, and it focuses on a young man who comes home hiding his HIV diagnosis in 1985, hence the title. It's one that really explores how prejudice is permeated into our culture, how it seeps into our very everyday kind of existence, not just with the fact that he cannot be open with his family about his sexuality, but in the conservative news that plays around him and the election of Reagan. It's so emotional and it's gripping, and it really gets into the idea of the lost generation. So many men and women and people who died from this horrible disease that got absolutely no attention by the state and got looked down upon by people. It's extremely tough and definitely a massive tearjerker, but one that I think is highly recommended, and its timing does not feel too coincidental, because there's a lot in this film that feels sadly way too relevant.
What, you mean computers are going to start dating each other?
Andrew Bujalski of Mumblecore fame. One of my favourite little digs at him was somebody calling him Albus Mumblecore. It's very big in that scene. I'm not as attuned to the American independence scene from that time, the Mumblecore scene, if you will. But this one has a very strange off-kilter. It's more lo-fi approach, because there is a science fiction element to it, but it's about like those competitions and the tournaments that come about. I love the awkwardness in this. I'm not usually somebody who goes for kind of awkward humor, but this feels very true to life, and it gets across like just how distinctively odd people like this can be. It feels so distinctive in that manner that you hear a movie about looking at a computer chess tournament. This is probably not what you're expecting, but it's charming and seriously watchable in its own way. Hey, gay rom for all the family. A gay exploitative horror film from 2018. I love the way that it kind of blends into the exploitation scene, but again, the unique charm is that it's about a gay porno company and a person who is murdering based on that. I love the sense of community involved in this, is a weird way to put it, but the way that they seem really in this together, for better or for worse. And it doesn't tend to take prisoners. It's really fun and evocative, and I love the imagery of it. I love how far it goes to get across the exploitation idea without it feeling crass or vulgar or homophobic. I like how the main character is kind of a bitch. I don't think the film sympathizes with her actions that far, and she's definitely very unlikable, but she's really compelling in her own way, and I really like that kind of fucked up relationship she has. It's got something for, again, the exploitation fiends and also the gay fiends. Both fiends come together and have a romping good time of bloody violent murder. Enjoy. This is one of the earlier films from Ben Wheatley. He's kind of, I think he's on for doing a Field in England and a couple of other things out there. High Rise is another one. It's definitely got his sensibility, his willingness to make you feel as uncomfortable as possible. But it's also got this kind of Wicker Man edge to it as well. And the thing is, that doesn't become very apparent until the ending. It definitely knows how to play on your expectations and play with your emotions in a way to get an emotionally gripping but pretty off-kilter and uncomfortable feel to it, but it's something from one of the most fascinating voices in contemporary cinema. Whether I like or hate his films, I'm always interested in watching them, so it's definitely something to check out if you haven't. His earlier work is definitely something that feels a lot less willing to hold your hand, for lack of a better term. Not that his films really do, but it's more weakly unrestrained, for lack of better term.
My God. Oh my God.
So if you haven't seen this film, all I will say is it's about a man who runs a tickling tournament, and a television producer finds this and finds this entertaining enough to write to him. He gets a rather brusque and rude response and decides to explore this. What he finds out is some of the most fucked up things I have ever seen in a documentary. Sometimes it's hard to believe this actually happened. That's all I'll say. This movie is so compelling, it's so watchable, and it really takes you on a freaking journey. If you like true crime and stuff like that and discovering stuff as it goes on, this is definitely the movie for you. A really messed up, psychologically grueling dive down a rabbit hole, all focused on a tickling tournament. I love it.
Tidens fylde. Ørkenen sluger dem.
A lot of movies try to deconstruct the Western because it's such a ubiquitous genre. This one does it in a rather interesting way. It's a massive journey through a wilderness where the main character is chasing after his daughter to discover things he'd rather not. It's definitely one that probably could do with a rewatch on my part, because it's really out there and it's very much a film you gotta think about and understand the broader implications, both thematically and metaphysically. It's one of my favorite performances from Viggo Mortensen, who's usually great. He's always tends to be fantastic, but he's got this kind of soulful stoicism that really gets you in his mind, where he just doesn't really say anything. It's a really strong performance, and it's probably one of the most distinctive films he has ever made, and one of the better westerns to deconstruct the Western in a way that feels very avant-garde without it feeling overstuffed or pretentious. It's a powerful journey. It's difficult to describe where it ends up.
跟我拿着安面。
This is a Iranian horror film about a woman who discovers a genie in the middle of a horrific war, and it's one of the most tense and unsettling descents into destruction and chaos, while also experiencing a demonic genie. Got on one of Mark Mo's best lists. I think he named it one of either the best film of the 2010 of the last 10 years, or one of the best films. It's very high compliment coming from such a great film critic. It's a perfect blend of horror as a metaphor with a really compelling protagonist who's just trying to keep her daughter safe. It takes you on this really dismal journey. It's really difficult to grasp where the real horror truly is. Let there be unnatural light. This is like the third or fourth time I've tried to finish this. I'm kind of getting a little tense, but I'm determined to finish this all in one day. One day we can do this. Guy Madden, the Wizard of the Dead film. This is kind of a Russian nesting doll thing where one leads into the other and then leads out into completing the story. It's really interesting. It's a lot of old forgotten films or lost films in time and stuff. It's an interesting kind of tapestry into the world of cinema that people won't really think about because, well, the footage is missing. I love that this movie kind of celebrates that, but also being kooky and weird and off-kilter and strange. Very much its own thing, while also paying tribute to what's come before. And, you know, all the great films should do that in one capacity or another.
Is in your hand.
This is another one that kind of got a bit of recognizability when it first came out. That's kind of just faded as it goes along, which is a shame because it's a really strong film. It's got a great sense of 80s nostalgia, the fact the movie's set in 1997, which I love. It's very much within that tapestry of being distinctively, beautifully 80s, and the dystopia and the kooky names for things and the gadgets and stuff, but at its heart, it's a story of love and heroism. It's really fun, and it's something you should bring your friends to. Everyone should watch it. Turbo Kid's great. It's just a really charming, really endearing movie, and it has Michael Ironside. What else can you ask for? This is a prison drama that's kind of got a sense of authenticity because it's based on the writer's experience volunteering in it. He's kind of based on a character in the film, but it's not really about that. It's about this father and son who clearly are at odds with each other, forced to be in the situation. This is an overused word in film, but it's raw in a way that a lot of films don't really have that kind of power. I really dug it. It's gritty as hell. It's got some really interesting perspectives on prison life and what it means to be locked inside, what your life is like when you're spending most of it in jail, and gets that across in a way that can only be done through lived experience. You really feel the authentic lived life of the person who's writing about this, and especially how they communicate how the prisoners felt in this situation. Beautiful dreamer, awaken. This is kind of a more surrealist one. It's about a woman who is recalling what she went through in her life in the Magdalene laundries and where it led from that direction. It's very distinctively visual. It really looks at how memory affects us and how it molds us into the person we are. It's got a really tragic, sad ending, which I really appreciated. It's bittersweet in a lot of ways. It's one of those ones that takes you more on a journey. It is telling a story, but it's the one where you experience the kind of trauma and uncomfortable lived experience of being a woman who had a son out of wedlock in Ireland in this time, and it's a good tapestry of that period where you bargained your humanity just for getting pregnant, and it's a rather uncomfortable look at Irish society, but it's a necessary one. It's beautifully told here.
Dad, I can't gå ud med.
Nu kommer der en. Han afsætter. Hvad var det?
Det var bare en kanin.
Der var et kraftstejl med en stor kanin.
This is a film that really kind of commits to its own absolute bomminess, and I really love it. Its absolute bizarre charms are something it wears completely on its sleeve. I really love how it just 100% commits to that oddity. It's one of those things where I don't know if you can guess the twist, but it's so well set up. It does what everything does. Like, the clues are there. It's just for you to put it all together. Yeah, it's not the most comfortable watch, but I really liked it. It's the right kind of odd. I really appreciate it. I mean, a lot of the films on this are really eccentric, but this one is an odd entirely of its own building, and I love it. This one only came out last year, and nobody really talked about it, which is a shame. It's about a fisherman, and his brother takes their boat to a tourist thing that he refuses to use because he doesn't want to sell himself out like that. It's kind of like that gentrification idea of how modernity and tourist living, in lack of a better term, invades a way of life. But I don't think it takes sides per se. I don't think it's in the protagonist's corner in this way, even though he is clearly the character most you sympathize with, because he is the one we follow the most. One thing's I love about it, the way it's shot is this kind of old-timey film where the soundscape sounds very old and the film looks really old. And it's a great way of capturing that period being longed for as it's being thrown into a more modern way of life, whether it wants to or not. It's a great film, really well made. I really loved the cleverness behind its structure and its presentation, and it's definitely one I'm happy to close out on. Okay, that's all the films I wanted to talk about today. Stay safe. got the trailer coming, it's rolling round the bend. And I'm rolling through the land.